All right, so Thursday night, we got a member spotlight. We've missed a couple weeks, but we're back, and this is going to be a lot of fun to talk with Nico Torres, and because Nico is really starting off in his career of triathlon. And I'll tell you that we'll get to some of the stories, but he and I crossed paths in Ironman St. George a few times, and that was so neat to see him. And boy, that was a tough day, and I can't wait to hear more about it. But Nico, you just seem to have a smile. Well, there was a bit of a smile, maybe a forced smile at one
A little
point,
bit of
but it was
painful
really
smile.
neat to see you during the race. And really glad that you're joining us because I'm really interested in hearing more about how you got into triathlon and really where you're going with the sport too, because clearly you have some great talent. But I'm going to turn it over to Bob Gamble for the official introduction.
Well, thank you, John, and welcome again, Nico. This is whenever when I started learning about you, I thinking, man, we got to get you on this show, on this presentation, because your story is really amazing. And for those folks who are listening, Nico did his first triathlon when he was 24 years old, Kokopelli sprint. 7 months later, he did the St. George Ironman course, which is arguably the hardest course in the world, if not one of the hardest courses, if not the hardest. And we're talking 7 months from sprint to full Ironman on a brutal, I didn't race it, but I understand it's brutal course. So welcome, Nico, and congratulations. And my first
Thanks for
question
having me.
to first question to you is, you're a talented athlete. So I'm just wondering, what did you do before in high school and college that allowed you to go from a sprint to a full Ironman in 7 months?
So in high school and college, or in high school, I played soccer mostly. And I would run. So for me, soccer was in the fall, and I would swim in the winter and then run track in the spring just to stay in shape, which I didn't really take seriously in high school, but helped tremendously when I learned that those were two out of the three disciplines in triathlons.
Did you swim competitively in high school?
I didn't really race too much in the meets. It was more of like, an agreement with the coach that, hey, like I need something to stay in shape through the winter. Can I just join the practices? And they're like, yeah, of course. And then in college, didn't really play too many sports, but I ran to stay in shape. Graduated from college like right before the pandemic, and when gyms shut down, I got really tired of running every day and went and bought a bike. And then found out there was a sport called triathlon, and all I needed to do was pick up swimming again. And yeah.
That is a fantastic way to start. You're running your rear end off in soccer, and you got your VO2 max way up there, and then you're swimming at the same time, which really helps, your base. And I mean, swimming is a big part of triathlon, so that's cool. Now, I also want to get started on your first triathlon was Kokopelli. What made you do the first triathlon? And how did you get into triathlon?
So I think I'm a member at Lifetime, and I think I was trying to think back to how I really got into it, and I think I saw somebody walking in Lifetime with like an Ironman bag. It might have been you, John. It might have been another member, but I was like, what is Ironman? And like, I started going on Google, looking up Ironmans and watching YouTube videos, and it looked super cool. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. I had already been riding and running. So I was like, how hard can it be to swim 1,200 yards in open water?
Yeah.
So I signed up for Kokopelli on a whim. And
was that the sprint? That was the sprint, or was that an Olympic?
Olympic.
Oh, okay, so your first one was an Olympic then. My
bad.
Yeah.
And it was a lot harder than I thought. The swim took me forever. I hadn't actually never practiced open water swimming before the triathlon. And, there's a moment where I was just laying there on my back, wondering if I was going to make it back.
That makes me feel a little better. The fact that you actually you went there. I mean, I don't know anyone who really hasn't gone there.
Yeah, and it was tough, but right after that, I was like, I need to join a club and I need to get out to like meet. And start training on these, but I was hooked from the start. It was so much fun, and being able to compete again and being able to engage in competitive sports again after not doing that since high school, college was automatically hooked me. So
now everybody who's listening to this, for the record, this happened less than a year ago. This that Nico saw that bag, and whether it was John's or your friend Connor Hewlett's, but you're just getting started, and then your first race in August, and this is like what, 9 months later. So that's a whole lot has happened in the meantime.
Yeah, so basically I kept doing BBSC tries between August and December. So I did like 4 more, Pumpkin Man. I think I did Las Vegas try, and then the other one they have in Utah. And,
it was Kokopelli Sand Hollow.
Yeah, Sand Hollow. And was like, you know what, like maybe I can do a 70.3. The swim isn't that much harder. It's twice the bike and twice the run, but I was like, how hard can it be? So signed up for my first 70.3 that December.
Which one was that? That was Indian Wells?
Yeah. And it was a lot harder than I thought,
I'm glad to know that too.
I had done the distances for every discipline separately, but never really built up to the race, never really did a brick. And so, yeah, it was a lot harder than I thought, but it was super rewarding. And again, I was like super hooked, and yeah, so.
Okay, now John's going to have some questions for you about your first triathlon and on the starting line.
Yeah,
John, go ahead.
I love this. Boy, you really compressed a lot of races in a short period of time, and going right into Indian Wells, and so yeah, I want to walk back just a little bit. And your first triathlon you signed up for, how soon did you start training specifically for that event?
For the Kokopelli or Indian Wells?
Yeah, Kokopelli.
I actually didn't train for it at all. I was like, let me, it was kind of like right coming out of the pandemic. So during the pandemic, I was doing tons of running, tons of biking, without specifically training for triathlon. It was just doing it to stay in shape and for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, I've kind of I have the miles under my belt.
Yeah.
While I may not have been doing them at race pace, let me sign up for this and kind of see where I stand in terms of, watts, miles per hour. So I didn't really do any training. I just kind of signed up for it and was like, this will be my base as to build off for future races.
I love it. I think that's a really great way to start, and really no pressure at that point either. And obviously you've got the athletic background, and you, like you said, you had the fitness. I think a lot of people, it's great to hear this, take the risk and go do the event if you've got the fitness. But
yeah, I had zero expectation. Didn't know where I was going to stand in terms of times. I'm sure my transition times were super long.
Yeah.
I would probably recommend starting with the sprint
instead
of an Olympic. But I was like just trying to have fun with it.
Hey, there's one other thing that you mentioned, Nico, that I know that John was glad to hear it. You may not know it, but John has a PhD in exercise physiology. So when you said that you were not racing, you were not training at race pace, you were training below that. That's actually, you were doing the right thing. You were building up the base, and you were making changes, that were really so much better than you working out hard. So like I said, you whether you knew it or not, you were doing everything right. How did you learn how to train? Did you have a coach?
No, just really I was really self-taught, and kind of just started trying to meet as many people within the club and within the community, and through group rides, and kind of through following them on Strava and seeing what they're doing to build up for races, kind of trying to mimic them. And yeah.
So there's something else that before I forget about it is you didn't come to Vegas to stay. You came for school, and now you're here. So what is it that you like about Vegas that's keeping you here?
I think the weather. It's you can ride outside almost 12 months out of the year, pretty much, and the tri community, cycling community is so great here, and while racing with people from different states, I think when you train in Vegas, it definitely gives you an edge over somebody who's training in New York or Chicago or of another big city. I mean, you have some of the hardest terrain, and here, and dealing with the heat on top of that, like, really builds you up for races like St. George or Kona or whatever the case may be.
No, that's so true, and that's great. And so as fellow East Coasters, it's nice to be out in the Southwest region here. We have to deal with the heat, but it's still great training. So I'm curious, going back to when you started out and you did Kokopelli, did you already have a plan to do these other races, or did you do Kokopelli and then you started signing up for things?
Yeah, so I did Kokopelli, and for me, Kokopelli was like a race to see if I even like the sport or not. I wasn't even sure if I was going to like this. Maybe I wanted to just go back and stick to riding my bike for fun and running. So I hadn't signed up for any races after that, but then I joined the Tri Club, and seeing that other people were starting to train for these big 70.3s and Ironmans, I was like, okay, like, let me start finding some other races on the calendar. So
that's pretty. It's interesting that you did your first race as an Olympic, and then it still, it didn't scare you off, because most people will do a sprint, and then they say that wasn't too bad, I'll do another one.
Yeah, Rick made a great point when you guys did this. Had a conversation.
Rick Simpson.
And yeah, he talking about St. George, he said, he said I think he said something along the lines of he doesn't recommend doing an Ironman full out, because you can do like a full distance Ironman or a 70.3, and if you're not prepared for it, you can burn out really quickly or just not enjoy the sport. And I 100% agree with that. I think if you rush into the sport too quickly and you don't build up with baby steps leading up to an Ironman, it can really make the sport unenjoyable.
Good grief, you are only 24 and you have that wisdom already. That is crazy.
I got it from Rick.
Yeah, it's a good mentor for sure. Well, no, that's huge that you realize building it up slowly, it will prevent you from A, burning out, and B, getting injured, which, it's like, lots of folks do.
Well, I love this, that you did a sort of a test event, if you will, in Kokopelli, and then you started exploring these other races. So it sounds like you got into a group of people that were sort of influential and started talking about these longer distance. So when did you decide to do the 70.3?
So after Kokopelli, I kind of signed up for every BBSC race that was in Utah or in Vegas up until the end of the year. And I was like, you know what, like I've done, and so I think like I signed up for it late, but I was like, I've done 3 Olympics by now. I think I'm in pretty good enough shape to do a 70.3. And I was already sort of like in that race mode. And so, I signed up for it. I still think there's a lot I could learn from it, or especially within transitions and nutrition. I think, doing 3 or 4 Olympics leading up to like a first 70.3 is a pretty good idea. And
how did you start adjusting your training, or did you adjust your training going from the first race to getting ready for the 70.3?
So I think for me, what really helps a ton is, and I did the same exact thing for St. George, was doing like smaller races leading up to the big event.
Oh,
So because that gives me the confidence of like, hey, like I'm doing all these races leading up to the event. Just having that something to continuously work towards, like, gets you in that race mindset of, whereas like if I signed up for St. George 5 months out and I didn't have any races in between, I might have an off month and my training might decline. So having those races in between really kind of helps you, have that eye on the target.
no, that's great. Well, and that's nice because it's neat to have that goal and to work towards, and then the races are sort of steps towards that. Okay, so when did you decide to sign up for Ironman St. George?
So after my 70.3, I was like, okay, like, you just learned about triathlon in August, and you just did like 4 or 5 Olympics and your first 70.3. And don't get me wrong, the 70.3 was brutal. Like I was out for a week. But I was like, now if you want to do the Ironman, now is probably the time where, you've got great work-life balance. You've got a great community behind you, great training partners. You should sign up for it now. So I was going through my New Year's resolutions and I was like, I think doing a full Ironman in 2022 is going to be one of my New Year's resolutions. And the way I found St. George was purely from a logistical standpoint. I was looking for Ironmans that are close to Vegas, lake swim, because to this day, I still haven't done an ocean swim.
No.
And that was a little bit intimidating for me. I wanted to do something that, I didn't want to really deal with the current on my first Ironman, full distance Ironman. So I was like, oh, perfect. St. George is close by. I don't have to ship my bike, worry about that. I don't have to fly. Logistically, it makes sense. So I signed up for it. And soon after, they announced it as the championship race. And people started talking about how difficult the bike was going to be and the run. And I was like, and I didn't look at any of that when I signed up for the race. And then I was like, oh, what did I get myself into?
I love it. I love it.
Hey, tell me something, Nico. What bike did you use? What kind of bike did you use? Was it a road bike at St. George or a tri bike?
Road bike. So yeah, I don't have a tri bike yet. I was still on the fence about it at that point. I was like, I'm not sure. I was like, maybe do your first full Ironman before getting a tri bike and still see if you like the sport.
Good.
Did you have clip-ons by any chance? The clip-on aero bars. You did the full Ironman on drops.
Wow, that's
impressive. And I actually think it worked to my favor.
I was going to say, I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, I think
it climbs a whole lot better than a tri bike.
Yeah, on the descents too, and John, you can maybe talk about this too, but I thought a lot of people were saying, after the race and before the race, the descents were very bumpy. The road was super bumpy. So even on the descents, I was passing people on tri bikes because they were out of aero position. And I actually, even though I was on my drops, I was so used to knowing how to get aero in the drops on a road bike. Whereas I feel like people on tri bikes, we're not used to going downhill outside of their aero bars. And, we're a little bit more uncomfortable with that. So
yeah, that's a important point. I mean, that's huge.
No, those descents were a little scary and definitely bumpy. Okay, so now let's get to St. George, and you get to the swim. You're taking the shuttle to transition. I mean, what was going through your mind that within a year you've gone from your first race to an Ironman? What's going through your mind as you're getting ready to start the event?
Nerves. So I had my uncle from Colorado come and chirp at me. And that was super helpful. And he's done several Ironmans. His wife does Ironmans a ton too. And he was giving me a bunch of tips. And, I've never done a 4,000 yard swim prior to the Ironman. I think the furthest I've ever swam in open water was 2000.
Yeah.
Good grief.
And I never did a century ride either.
Oh boy. I love it.
So I was really nervous, and you know, my Sherpa, or my uncle, he was looking at through my Strava, and you know, he was worried I wasn't going to make the cutoffs, and you know, just worry about pacing yourself.
And for the
So
record, you didn't even come close to your cutoffs. You were solid.
Yeah. So you know, me being a finance guy and a numbers guy, you know, prior to the race, I had, you know, modeled out all these, okay, what's a worst case scenario? What's a base case scenario? What's a best case scenario? You know, what happens if you get a flat? You know, how do you account for that time? You know, dialing in my nutrition, how many calories should I be drinking an hour? And yeah, the swim was by far the scariest part, you know.
Was it? Okay, so tell us about that. Like, where that was it the start or somewhere along the way, or?
So I just, you know, I was like, I had never done a distance. And you can never replicate in training, you know, what it's like to race with like 50 people, you know,
People
within
slapping your legs.
Yeah. So I really had to pee. So I was one of the first groups in my age group to go in the corral. And that was a big mistake because everybody just ran over me right after we started. So I got kicked in the face like 5 times.
Oh no.
And to the point where I like just swam to a guy on a paddleboard and was like, just like reset, you know, like reset my goggles.
Good.
You know, made sure I was, you know, not dizzy, and kind of like, you know, calm my breath for like 2 seconds and was watching everybody swimming. And I remember during the race briefing that they said you can swim on either side of the yellow buoys as long as you turn on the outside of the turn buoys.
Good.
And I saw everybody swimming to the outside of the yellow buoys. And so what I did was I cut across and just swam on the inside. And I did that for the whole race. And I think that really saved me because I never got near anybody except for the turn buoys. And that was super great. And, you know,
that's great that you thought of that on the fly, you know. It's
you
solve the problems.
Yeah, because, you know, like after like the first 2,000 yards, I was just in full survival mode. I was like you just got to get this over with.
I got this.
I love it.
And so I was just trying to pace myself, but not having to worry about having all those people around me really like helped me focus on making sure I got to the finish line of that swim.
This is your event, and you know, that's really great for people to hear. Is just, you know, if you get kicked or something happened, get to a paddleboard, reset. I love that. That's really great advice. Okay, so now you get the swim behind you, and you get out and you go through transition, grab your bike, and you start off. And that course, it was unforgiving. It was hills right from the beginning. How'd the bike go?
Yeah, so the swim, when I was building out these scenarios, I was like, okay, you'll probably finish the swim in about an hour and a half, which is exactly what I did. So I was like, okay, cool. Like, you know, you're kind of like meeting your expectation up to this point. So my goal for the bike was to average 16 to 16 and a half miles per hour.
Okay.
I don't have a power meter on my bike, so really going off of mileage and cadence. And so for the pretty much about when I got to like mile 60, 70, I was still at that 16 and a half, 16 mile per hour average. And that's when I knew I had it. I was like, okay, like you don't have to relax, so to speak, but you know, you don't have to worry about meeting any cutoffs at this point. Like the race is you've got the race in the bag. And for me, that's really where I started enjoying it. I think, you know, a lot of people were saying the wall was going to be the hardest part. I actually disagree. I didn't think it was that bad. I think Snow Canyon was a lot worse. And I think, I think the biggest lesson I learned from the race and from the bike was in any full Ironman I'm going to do from now on is bike the last 30 miles because I didn't have any drinks with me going into the last going through Snow Canyon because I didn't think the loop was going to be that long. So you know how you go down the highway and then you loop into Snow Canyon. I thought we were going to reach the aid station sooner than.
Oh, right. I know what you mean. That's right.
Yeah,
That last aid station was still a ways away. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I first went to the aid station, I got water, but I made the mistake of pouring it all over myself, and I forgot to grab another one. I was like, oh, it's just a loop. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
And got to Snow Canyon, and I was just cramping hard, and people were tipping over, people were walking up their bikes, and I was like, you just got to make it up this hill, and then it's a downhill all the way to the finish line. But yeah, I think my biggest lesson learned from the bike and that race was always bike the last 30 miles of the race, because that's really when you start triaging. And had I done that, I think I would have stayed at 60-mile-per-hour average, but just that Snow Canyon brought me down to about like 15. So
I love that.
I'm not sure what are you saying? Always bike the last 30 miles. I don't understand.
So I think like mile 80 was really where I started hurting. And for me, if I had known how much elevation.
So you're saying is practice it ahead of time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just like you know what's coming.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's great advice. And so ahead of time, go practice that last 30 miles, because you're right. That's going to be the part that you're going to want to really know as you get going into T2. And T2 is where we cross paths. And I think I saw you, and I was really impressed with how you were just taking your time, being very, persistent and very deliberate in what you were doing in the in T2. But walk us through the run a bit. That was no easy run either.
No, it wasn't. But you know what? And this is me. I saw a lot of people walking at first, so. Actually, my second half of the marathon was a lot faster than my first half.
Oh, good.
And I think I just took the first half a little too easy. I saw a lot of people walking, so subconsciously I was like, okay, you have time, go ahead and walk a bit. And looking back though, and even as I was running the last half marathon, I was like, you definitely could have ran a little bit more, but just seeing other athletes walk was kind of like me giving myself like the okay to walk, which I wish I hadn't done. But it was I love the run. I got to talk to a ton of people. Had a ton of people from the Tri Club cheering me on, which I was so out of it that I couldn't even recognize them. I think Matt was there. Yeah. A couple others. Saw a couple people from the Tri Club Racing too. So it's cool to see that.
That makes it a lot of fun. And it's neat to encourage each other.
Yeah, for sure.
But this is your first one, and so it's really neat to hear you talk about how to approach the run. And I'm guessing you're going to do another one. But it's great how you're evaluating the moment as well as thinking back on what your plan was. So this is great. So now the second half was faster. That's fantastic. So tell us about the finish line.
Yeah. So the second half, what I did was my plan was, okay, what I would do is I would run to somebody ahead of me, walk with them for about a minute, and then do it again. So I would just like run to someone ahead of me, walk with them for about 5 or like a minute or two, then run
and then reel somebody else in.
Yeah. And finally, got to the finish line and it was so surreal, it was just like, it's just one of those moments where you're like, you can't believe it's over, and you're like glad it's over, but you wish it wasn't.
Yeah.
Good way to put it.
Yeah. And, it was super emotional. And I think, part of me leading up to the race was like, you didn't really train as hard as you should have for this race. And I was afraid that I was going to, burn out and not like it at the end. But I was like, gosh, like, now Kona is the ultimate goal, like being able to race in that. And I think, doing a championship race, even though it wasn't in Kona, kind of set the bar high for myself.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I'm like just completely hooked on the sport now.
Oh, I love it.
Can't wait to do my
That's
next
awesome.
one. So
That's awesome that you actually did the second half of the marathon faster than the first. That's just incredible. I was just curious, have you signed up for another Ironman yet?
So right now I'm thinking of doing another 70.3 in like December, around the same time that I did Indian Wells, just to get a comparison. I want to see how much time can I shave off compared to 2021. Because I think there's tons of improvement to
you're not going to shave off time. You're going to knock it off with an axe. I'm serious.
I think so. Yeah. And then, start looking at Ironmans next year. But, I think for Ironmans especially, I'd love to do like an ocean swim. I still haven't done a single ocean swim try. So that would be a ton of fun.
Sign up for Oceanside. It's not a bad ocean swim, actually. It's
that's what I've heard.
Take you into a harbor.
Well, Nico, this is so impressive, and it's really to hear your story and just the success that you're having in this first year. And what the way that you're talking, you're coming across as an experienced triathlete, and the things that you're saying in terms of watching, not to burn out and being consistent with the training. I mean, that's so good to hear. I think you're going to have a long career. So, Nico, this is what a story. An Ironman St. George. I imagine that finish line was emotional, and you've got your uncle there who knows Ironman, and that must have been a proud moment for all of you. So, congratulations on that, and thank you for joining us and sharing this a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, I would love to see a bookmaker take odds on how much time you're going to take off your 70.3 and your full Ironman, because I know it's going to be a ton.
Yeah.
So
especially if we don't have 7,000 feet of elevation.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, Nico, and I look forward to seeing you at the next event.
Thank you.
All right. Talk soon.